The introduction of the Vitaphone has been received both by the public and the artistic world with a great deal of interest and favor. A description of this creation from a more or less technical point of view may therefore be of interest to you. In this new development, the telephone has played an important part, and it seems altogether fitting that this year, which marks the semi-centennial of the birth of the telephone, should also mark the introduction in perfected form of a new application of the telephonic principle, a development which is destined to create an entirely new art, where the medium of expression is the synchronized reproduction of sound and scene. From the beginning of the attempts to produce and accomplish what the Vitaphone does with such precision, the problem was not so much that of synchronizing sound and picture as it was the recording and reproduction of the sound portion of the combination, and doing it with such clarity as to make it appear that one was listening to the sound from its original source. But it was not until some rather recent and fundamental advances in the telephone art had been perfected that we had available the elements necessary to accomplish a type of sound reproduction which one might term a perfect illusion. And this, of course, is the ideal which has been striven for ever since the idea of synchronized sound and picture was conceived. And in fact, it was because of the lack of means for accomplishing this portion of the production that real success has heretofore not been attained. The first big step in this direction was the perfecting in the Bell Telephone laboratories of the so-called public address system, by means of which the volume of sound from a telephone could be amplified to such an extent that the voice of the speaker could be heard simultaneously by many thousands of listeners. The first noteworthy demonstration of this development took place in 1921 upon the occasion of the inauguration of the late President Harding. At this time, an audience of more than 125,000 people surrounding the front of the Capitol building were able to hear clearly and distinctly all of the words spoken during the entire inaugural program. We have in this system, therefore, the element which makes possible the transmission of sound from a single source to large groups of people. And that is exactly what is required in connection with synchronized sound and picture. The next important step was the perfecting of the means for electrically recording at a distance sounds such as speech and music, and recording it in such a way that permanent and reproducible records could be made. This problem has been the subject of continuous study for a great many years. The past year and a half has seen the successful conclusion of this work, and many of you have observed in listening to the latest phonograph records, which are recorded by the electrical process, a distinct difference. These new records were demonstrated before this society last fall. Now the next and last step has to do with the perfecting of the means for reproducing the sound from the record in such volume and with such faithfulness as it would appear as a perfect reproduction of the original sound, regardless of the size of the auditorium or the number of listeners. Now as to their application to the Vitaphone. In the electrical recording of sound, there is employed a pickup microphone similar to that employed in the public address system and also similar to that now used in the radio broadcasting stations. Vacuum tube amplifiers are employed to amplify the weak current generated by the action of the sound waves upon the pickup microphone. This amplification can be of sufficient degree to provide the power necessary to operate the recording mechanism required to make a permanent record. In the public address system, of course, the currents are also amplified, but they are led to loudspeakers. In this case, we lead the currents to a recording mechanism which will be described later. This arrangement makes it possible to locate the microphone quite independently of the recording device and also in proper relation to the scene to be photographed. Being an electrical system, the problem of synchronization is very simple. Now as to the reproducing side of the combination. In the projection of the motion picture and the reproduction of the sound, there is employed substantially the reverse of the process just described, that is, the recording process. The sound record, in the form of a large disc, is rotated on a turntable. This turntable is geared directly to the motion picture projecting machine and is driven by a common constant speed electric motor. Associated with this rotating record is an electrical pickup device which carries a needle in a manner similar to that of the sound box of the ordinary phonograph. The motion of this needle, however, small as it is sufficient to generate an electric current whose characteristics are identical with the sound which produced the original record. This electrical current is then amplified and provides the energy to operate a bank of loud-speaking telephones which are located in proper relation to the motion picture screen. Here again it can be seen that by using an electrical system, we are not restricted as to the location of the elements of the reproducing system, and therefore the problem of synchronization becomes a relatively simple one. From this very brief description of a rather complex system can be seen the essential part played by the telephone and its related art. We took advantage of our researches in this field to put together an entirely new and different system to serve an entirely different purpose, and to produce a mechanism around which we believe an entirely new art will be created. Now, mere words, oftentimes fall short of telling the whole story in a case like this, and we're going to take you on a little journey to the studios of the Vitaphone Corporation, where through their courtesy you're going to be allowed to see something of the operation of the apparatus which I have just described.
All right, Mr. Kraft, you're ready.
Thank you. You go ahead.
We are now in the studio of the Vitaphone Corporation. The short glimpse that you had gave you a general idea of the layout of the studio of this character. Later on, you'll have an opportunity of seeing more. In the meantime, however, in order that you may carry them clearly in mind the next time you see them, I'm going to refer to the different elements in the studio layout. First, on my left,
is a setup, a set, ready for photographing and recording to produce a synchronized picture. The only feature of that set which is not in accordance with the regular procedure is that the microphone is in plain view, as is the microphone into which I'm speaking at the present time. This is a demonstration and not a commercial production. Therefore, we're not worried very much about the particular location of the microphones. Next to the set to be photographed is the camera booth. On my extreme right is another space which is called the recording booth. In both cases, both the camera booth and the recording booth, one wall has been removed in order that you may see the mechanism within. In the case of the recording room, it is usually located at quite a distance from the camera booth and the set that is being photographed. Now, in order that you may fix a little more clearly in your mind the relative positions and general layout of the studio, we will go back to the original scene. Now a little more as to the details. There isn't very much to be said with regard to the setup, that is the scene to be photographed, more than I have already said. With regard to the camera booth, however, there are one or two interesting features. In the first place, it is heavily padded, arranged so that it can be moved about in the studio. The camera itself is quite similar to the ordinary motion picture cameras, with this very important exception, and that is it is driven by an electric motor which maintains absolutely constant speed and operates in exact synchronism with a similar motor which is used to drive the recording machine. Now, I think that will be sufficient with regard to the photographic end of the studio equipment, and we will now go over to the recording room and examine the mechanisms there. I think perhaps the best way to proceed here is to start with our familiar friend, the microphone. The current generated by the microphone is led to the amplifier, shown on my right. This amplifier is quite similar to that used in the public address system about which I spoke earlier in the talk. From the amplifier, wires lead to an electrical recording device which is mounted on the recording machine which you see at my left. The recording machine proper consists of a rotating turntable which is made to carry a wax disc. This turntable is maintained at a constant speed of rotation through an electric motor mounted underneath. This motor operating in exact synchronism with the corresponding motor in the camera. This is the electrical recording device, the most sensitive part of the equipment. Its function is to impress upon the wax an exact record of the electric current produced by the original pickup microphone. This is a very delicate operation, and that accounts for the presence of the microscope which is employed to determine the character of the cut as the work goes on. As I said before, this booth may be removed quite far from the actual photographing and must be soundproof both inside and out. This, I believe, covers in sufficient detail the various elements going to make up the studio equipment, and I believe you will be interested in seeing the studio in actual operation, and that is the next thing we're going to do. Are you ready, Mr. Heller?
Yes, Mr. Let's hit your lights, Ernie. Come on, boy. Let him off. Come on. Let's see if the lights are quiet.
All right, hit that sunlight, Ernie.
Okay. Just. All right, everybody quiet, please. After the bell. All the time in the tropical climate where they do that funny, funny dance. I fell in love with the tropical dove while doing that funny, funny dance. Oh, the poor little kid, she never did have a bit of loving before. Oh, I made up my mind that I wasn't fine, the only girl that I adore. She's my hula baby, someday she'll be a lady, wing someday. And we live in Hawaiian sunshine and drink the dark brown moonshine and let the rest of the world go by. How are you? I'm bringing you kisses from over the sea. So go, hello. How are you? I'm happy to find you. You're waiting for me. And now I can use, and I use you ready to. And we can wake, and we can whack, and we can wakey, wacky woo. Hello, how are you? I'm glad to be back to Hawaii and you. Real life. Thanks, boys.
Well, you've taken another little journey without permission and warning. You are now seated behind the projection booth of the theater. Two of the walls of this projection booth have been removed so that you can see the machinery inside as we have in the previous demonstration. I told you earlier that the reproducing end of the system was substantially the reverse of the recording portion. So we will start in and go through the various elements of the reproducing end. We first have the amplifier, shown at my right, which is quite similar in many respects to the amplifier employed in the recording process. It is arranged, however, with volume control devices to permit of regulating the volume of reproduction to fit the various sizes of auditoriums that are used and the character of music that may be reproduced. This monitoring and control of volume is aided by the loudspeaker, which you will notice on the wall at my left. This is in operation throughout the reproduction of the record, so that the operators who are far distant from the stage can hear what is going on. Now, on my left is the projecting machine and associated turntable and reproducing elements. The projecting machine is practically standard in all respects. The turntable mechanism, which rotates the sound record, is geared directly, however, to the projecting machine, both being operated by a constant speed electric motor. This is possible where it was not possible in connection with the recording end of the process, because of the fact that the two pieces of mechanism can be closely associated in the same room and therefore directly geared together. This is the form of record that is employed. Now I've placed the record on the turntable and also located the reproducing element ready to start for reproduction of the record itself. You recall I mentioned this electrical reproducing element as being the device to which is attached a needle which follows the grooves in the record. The movement of this needle generating an electric current, very weak, which is amplified, and the current then goes to the special loud-speaking telephones which are mounted adjacent to the motion picture screen. Now, we started to take a picture in the studio, and that picture has been completed. And in order that you may see how this portion of the mechanism actually operates, although the lamp has been operated all this time, and you can probably hear it, we will operate the rest of the mechanism and show the picture completely as it is now recorded on the screen for your benefit. I will ask the operator now to start the rest of the recording machinery.
All the time in the tropical climate where they do that funny dance. I fell in love with a tropical dove while doing that funny dance. Oh, the poor little kid, she never did have a bit of loving before. So I made up my mind that I wasn't fine, the only girl that I adore. See my hula baby, someday she'll be a lady. And we live in Hawaii sunshine and drink the dark brown moonshine and let the rest of the world go by. Hello, hello, how are you? I'm bringing you kisses from over the sea. Don't know down and oh, hello, hello, how are you? I'm happy to find you here waiting for me. And now I can you ukulele too. And I can wake and you can whack and we can wicky wacky woo. Hello, how are you? I'm glad to be back too. I hate to see the evening sun go down. I hate to see the evening sun go down. 'Cause my baby done left this town. Feeling tomorrow like I feel today. If I feel tomorrow like I feel today, I'll pack my trunk and make my getaway. You wanna see that slow bright brown of mine? Just like the old, the diamond Joseph line. He'd make a cross-eyed, a woman go so blind. Like in the midnight, he's like flags of truth. Just like his man in the hotel room. Like his dandy, sweet I love you. St. Louis woman with a diamond ring, don't leave that man run by her apron string. One for powder and store-bought hair. The man I love, I wouldn't go nowhere. Got the face blue, just blue as I can be. That man got a heart like a rocket in the sea. Oh, Red, he wouldn't got to bother me, does what it I used to be so sentimental, I couldn't bear to be alone. Our meeting was just accidental, but since that day, dear, I just can't help but say, dear, I don't mind being all alone when I'm all alone with you. You're the kind I've tried hard to find. You've made all my dreams come true. In the crowd, I feel mighty proud, but if you're not there, I'm lonesome. I don't mind being all alone when I'm all alone with you.
You have just witnessed through your eyes and ears a demonstration of the principles and manner of operation of a complicated mechanism. Interestingly enough, you have been enabled to do this through the operation of the same mechanism. More than that, you have witnessed the introduction of the Vitaphone into a field of practically unlimited usefulness, the field of education, as distinct from that of amusement, in which it has had its first commercial application. Events, complete in actions and in sound, can now be reproduced by these methods, regardless of time or place. We of the immediate present, as well as the generations to come, will be the gainers by this possibility. The Faraday of the future, the Pasteur, and the Galileo may, by this method, make available to students in any place or at any subsequent time the results of their researches and the demonstration of their scientific discoveries, and synchronize with this their own comments and discussions and even their own personalities. The communication and demonstration of educational material will be facilitated, and our entire educational process may undergo changes beyond our present imaginations. Is it too much to expect, for instance, that machines, such as have been described, may relieve the teaching staffs of our educational institutions of the enormous amount of routine work which they labor under at the present time, thus leaving them free to devote more time to their own researches, which will make them better teachers, or to give them greater time to devote to the students under their direction. Now, of course, such uses of expensive equipment must inevitably follow and cannot economically precede the successful commercial career of this apparatus in the more popular field of amusement. Selfishly, as well as generously, therefore, we who are interested in these other applications of the Vitaphone wish its success and a prosperous and rapid introduction into its own immediate field of amusement. The public will probably accept this as another one of the wonderful things that are brought forth for their benefit, pleasure, and amusement. We are all in danger of viewing these advances as the commonplace occurrences of our everyday life. We grow to expect them and to make use of them without giving much thought as to how they were brought about or the motivating influences which underlie their creation. We may all of us well stop to realize that each achievement, like that of the present, has been accomplished through the painstaking labors of many scientific workers over long periods. These men have grasped nature's secrets, and their researches now permit us to make nature obedient to our will in the wonderful ways of the present day. May we not, therefore, consider this demonstration as a tribute to the many workers, some of whose names you will never know, the many workers in the various fields of science and engineering who, through their enthusiastic labors, have made possible these results. I thank you.